All right, last week we looked at the supposed war between science and faith, as if faith and science are arch enemies and we must choose between the facts of scientific research and the superstitious folklore of religious tradition. And we learned that's just a bunch of garbage, that the war isn't between science and faith. It's a divide that's the result of the lens through which we interpret the same scientific evidence. I showed you the picture of 15,000 galaxies captured by the Hubble telescope in 2018. So if you have a naturalistic, atheistic lens that believes God doesn't exist, and in fact, there's no possibility that God exists, then when you view this scientific evidence, you must find an explanation that answers, well, why is all this there without someone designing it? But if you have a biblical lens, that you believe that God exists, then when you view the same scientific evidence, you find an explanation that answers, well, why did God create all this? Well, a biblical worldview looks at this photo and says, God created all of this, all of these galaxies, the vastness of space, to reveal the wonder of who He is. Because if His creation is this vast, then that's how much bigger God is. And the more I study and dig into the book of Genesis, the more impressed I am that even though this was written thousands of years ago, there were such specific, powerful scientific statements. And really, as I read chapter 1 of Genesis, I think of Star Trek. I don't know if you're a Trekkie, but if you ever thought about this, about Captain Kirk and Spock flying through space, and of course you have Scotty and he's the chief engineer. Have you ever thought about how much engineering it takes to allow a crew of humans to survive in space? I mean, the oxygen, just start there, and then water and sewage. And food and all these various systems. Well, here's a real life example. Here's SpaceX. Of course, this is Elon Musk's, one of his companies, and this is his company that wants to fly people to Mars. So here's a crosscut of Elon Musk's big Falcon ship, and I want you to notice all the systems that exist within this diagram that are all about life support. And this is all based upon NASA's life support systems. And here's a chart with their environmental control and life support systems. And here's how NASA defines a life support system as a group of devices that allow a human being to survive in space. And if any of these systems break down, you have a crisis. I mean, most of us are aware of Apollo 13 or have at least seen the movie. And when one of these systems broke down, it led to a chain reaction to where long-term survival in space was impossible. In fact, NASA has dozens of various types of engineers that they all work, and most of what they're working on is about life support in space. In fact, NASA employs over 10,000 engineers to make this possible. And all these engineers dedicated to create systems to artificially replicate the systems on Earth. Here's the principle. The bigger the crew, the more complex the system, the better the engineering must be. So here's a question. How complex must the engineering on a ship be that's designed to carry a crew of 8 billion people? Well, here's a picture of that ship. It was taken by Apollo 17 in 1972. Well, this just leads to the point that we're going to discover as we go through the first chapter of Genesis here, is that God is the ultimate engineer. Let's start verse 3. We read it last week, but just to remind us of the context. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We learned last week that what we have at this point is a big water planet. And now that God has turned on the lights, we can see it. Well, God created the light. He was creating order out of disorder, which is why He turned on the light. God created the universe to reveal His wonder. Verse 4, God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was an evening and there was a morning, the first day. Notice God calls for the light, and the light, it begins to do something powerful. It's actually the very first organized system in this chaotic environment. An intelligent designer was spinning the order of the universe into existence. And we come to a word in this verse that we have to deal with. It's the word that in the English Bibles is translated as day. Well, in Hebrew, it's the word yom. And there's been enormous debate about the meaning of that word day or yom here. The only time that we're really familiar with the word yom is every year we hear about the Jewish festival of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which this year I believe is in October. What we find in the text here is it's pretty clear language, and I'm just going to tell you what it says. And you can decide whether the word yom means a 24-hour period or if it means an age. And we'll just see what the word says. Yom is a word that is used 3,000 times in the Old Testament. And the normal, natural meaning of the word yom is day, as in a 24-hour period. Now, there are a few examples of it meaning an indefinite period of time, but it's only when the context makes that clear. For example, the Yom of trouble. So that would be the day of trouble. And so that's obviously talking about a period of time. But whenever the word Yom is used to describe a series of succession of days, and when it's used with what we call ordinals, which would be like first, second, third, fourth, like it's used here in Genesis 1, it always refers to a 24-hour period. So was this a 24-hour period or was it an age? Well, the word Yom points to being a 24-hour period. What the language is conveying to us, whether you choose to believe it or not, is that God created the earth in 7 successive 24-hour periods. Now, could it be ages? I mean, you could do some linguistic gymnastics to get there, but the simple reading of the word is 24-hour period. But you know what? We can debate about it, but we'll know when we meet Jesus face to face. Verse 6, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day, the second yom. After the first day, the earth was no longer without form, but it was still empty of life. And God, as the ultimate engineer, began to do some engineering. And he was engineering an amazing life support system. So where does God start as he shapes, molds, and prepares the earth to support life? Well, he starts with the life support system, just like NASA would. Remember that chart that NASA uses, ultimately the atmosphere, building into it the environmental and atmospheric and water systems. And this just leads to this. God is the ultimate hydrologist, in that for the first time, he creates the water cycle to circulate water between the ocean, the clouds, rain, and snow, back to the earth, into springs, lakes, rivers, and then back to the oceans. So Elon Musk, NASA, their 10,000 engineers, they work for decades to recreate the environment that God created in one day. God is the ultimate engineer. Verse 9, and God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear, and it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So God is the ultimate engineer. He's the ultimate hydrologist. He's the ultimate environmental scientist. He's the ultimate geologist. You know what just appeared? What came out from the deep? It's not just land. It's not just dirt. But the elements, all of the elements on the periodic table, and actually some elements probably haven't even been discovered yet. Do you realize that life on Earth would not be possible without those elements? All of those geological chemicals and elements that are used to sustain life here were prepared as a part of the life support system that God engineered. So those who think we must choose between the facts of scientific research and what Genesis teaches, they don't realize that here in verses 9 and 10, this is what God brings up. It's what is needed to support a planet full of life. God is the ultimate geologist. He's the ultimate chemist. God is the ultimate engineer. He's the ultimate scientist. Can you catch what God is up to here? He's creating the greatest life support system ever engineered. And by the way, notice the way Genesis describes the earth coming up out of the depths of the ocean. It's exactly what geologists find in the fossil record. What do we find on top of mountains around the world, including Mount Everest? We find ocean life fossilized into permanent proof that the rocks at the top of Mount Everest, now at 29,000 feet above sea level, were once underneath an ocean, just like the Bible says. The argument isn't science versus Genesis. It's the same evidence. It's the lens through which one understands that evidence and interprets it. Verse 11, then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. So God is the ultimate engineer. He's the ultimate hydrologist. He's the ultimate environmental scientist. He's the ultimate geologist. He's the ultimate chemist. He's the ultimate botanist. Notice these plants, they were made not as seeds, but as full-grown plants whose seed, its ability to reproduce themselves, was in themselves. This is a really important principle that throughout Genesis, God creates in the same way, full-grown and aged. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? It's the chicken. Adam was created a full-grown man. Trees were created as full-grown trees with fruit already ripe on them. This is the difference between one's apparent age versus its created age. So on day one, if you would have met Adam, Adam would have appeared mature and full-grown. So he would have appeared to have been 20 or 30 years old, despite only being a few hours old. Well, the whole universe, it was made as a functioning entity, complete and fully developed right from the beginning. This is going to be a very important concept when we consider what God created next. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on earth to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So we've learned God's the ultimate engineer, the ultimate hydrologist, the ultimate environmental scientist, the ultimate geologist, the ultimate chemist, the ultimate botanist, the ultimate astronomer. And I'm going to give you my best understanding of what's going on here. And honestly, it's probably not going to be satisfactory to most of you, but there's three huge issues here. Well, it's only problems depending on the lens through which you interpret the evidence. Well, here's the first problem. Genesis says God created plants, but he hasn't created the sun yet. That's the photosynthesis problem. Well, most of us learned in fourth grade that photosynthesis is the process by which Plants and other organisms use sunlight to synthesize foods and carbon dioxide and water. Well, it's only a problem with the wrong lens. We learned last week that light at this point, it came from God. Well, could it be that the light from the giver of life could be used for photosynthesis? Well, here's the second problem. We can see light from 13 billion light years away. That's called the light speed problem. Well, if we see light from galaxies 13 billion light years away, then the universe must be at least 13 billion years old. Well, throughout Genesis, God creates in the same way every time. Full grown and aged. God created the whole universe fully developed right from the beginning. So it just depends upon the lens that you're interpreting the same evidence through. I mean, Adam was created as a full-grown man. Trees were created as full-grown trees. The whole universe was made as a functioning entity, complete and fully developed right from the beginning. Therefore, it didn't take a billion years for that light from a star, which was a billion light years away, to reach the Earth. The light trail from the star was created in transit as if it were all the way from the star to the Earth. God can do anything he wants. Third problem, Genesis appears to say that God created the Earth before the rest of the universe. This is called the center of the universe problem. So we know that the Earth is not even the center of our solar system. We've known that since Copernicus. Well, we now know that we're here in the Milky Way galaxy. So how is it that God created the Earth before the rest of the universe? Well, I shared with you last week is that what people call the Big Bang is God going bang and it happening. What I believe is that Big Bang occurred in verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I think at that moment, he spread out all the elements of creation, the helium and the hydrogen that makes up most of the stars. He spread out all that matter of creation across the universe, galaxies, the stars, Earth, but it was chaotic. Like the earth was at that point, formless and empty. And God began working on the earth, providing light and shaping it, creating vegetation. But verse 14, what he did here is he lit the stars and the galaxies on fire. It all works together in a perfect system. He's spinning together, designed by the ultimate astronomer. More than an astronomer, he's the ultimate cosmologist. Verse 20, and God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. Having made the atmosphere and the hydrosphere and the lighting of the stars of the universe on fire and setting them all in motion, his life support was now complete, the whole system. Now the earth was ready to support life. Verse 21, so God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water in the seas and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. Well, God is the ultimate engineer, ultimate hydrologist, the ultimate environmental scientist, the ultimate geologist, the ultimate chemist, the ultimate botanist, the ultimate astronomer. He's the ultimate cosmologist. He's also the ultimate marine biologist and ornithologist. The first introduction of animal life was not a fragile blob of protoplasm that accidentally comes together in response to electrical charges, as evolutionary scientists believe. Rather, the water suddenly swarmed abundantly with creatures. The birds didn't slowly evolve from dinosaurs over millions of years, but instead the skies were flooded with birds. God is the ultimate biologist. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. I mean, this is a pattern. I hope you can see it. God's the ultimate engineer, the ultimate hydrologist, the ultimate environmental scientist, the ultimate geologist, the ultimate chemist, the ultimate botanist, the ultimate astronomer, the ultimate cosmologist, the ultimate biologist, the ultimate zoologist. Notice it says according to their kinds. Not all branches of an evolutionary tree. He made them according to their kinds. Livestock, those are animals that would be domesticated. Creatures that move along the ground, that's snakes, spiders, lizards, politicians. Wild animals, that's elephants, deers, foxes. The life support system was now complete and prepared for its human inhabitants, who would be given dominion over all of it. So I want to end with this picture of us, of where we are in the Milky Way galaxy. Where we learned last week that all of this entire galaxy, all of creation, it was created to reveal God's wonder. Well, through this study, we've caught a little bit of a glimpse into that glory. I want you to consider something. This war between the scientific community and faith. Well, understand this. The scientific community, all the cosmologists, biologists, geologists, they have discovered nothing that God didn't intend for them to find and that God didn't set into motion. Why? All to reveal His wonder. So ultimately, every scientist who has ever looked at the evidence is looking straight into the glory of God. God is the ultimate scientist.